Hello, I'm Ros Schwartz, and I'm going to give you some guidelines for presenting a translation project to publishers. The first thing you need to do is to check that the English language rights are available. You contact the foreign rights manager in the publishing house, and if the rights are free, ask them for permission to seek a publisher. You need to make it clear that your interest is that of a translator. You're not trying to be an agent. You're not trying to make money out of selling the rights. You just want to approach publishers with a view to translating the book. And if they're interested, they will contact the foreign publisher themselves. Some countries work through agents, in which case they might not be prepared to let you do this. You would have to contact the agent and see if you can collaborate with them. Most foreign publishers, though, are delighted when a translator wants to do their job for them. So then you need to identify potential publishers for your book. Make sure you approach the right kind of publisher. There are various publications like the Writers and Artists Yearbook or the Writer's Handbook that list publishers and give descriptions of the kind of things they do. It's really important that you tailor your approach to the right publisher. It's important to write to a named person as well at the publishing house. So call them, find out who the fiction or the non-fiction editor is. Professional presentation is very important. You need to put together a pack that includes a number of things. First of all, a letter describing the book, and most importantly, explaining why you're so enthusiastic about it and why you think it's appropriate for that publisher. So you might want to make reference to other titles on their list that this book is similar to, or that made you feel that they were the right publisher for your book. This letter is very important. Publishers are always being approached by translators, foreign publishers, and your book needs to have something really special to grab their interest, and that has to come across in the letter. So think very hard about this letter and what goes in it. Don't present it as a sort of moral imperative. This book is very important and it's an absolute duty to publish it. Publishers are commercial animals. They need to know who's going to buy the book, what market it will appeal to, because when they themselves present a project to their teams, their sales and marketing people, they need to make a financial case for it. They need to give an idea of what sort of market, what potential sales might be. So it's very important to speak their language. But at the same time, you need to communicate your enthusiasm, because they'll also work on the principle that if you're very excited about this book, then maybe 50,000 readers out there will also be excited. So it's a very delicate balance between presenting a commercial argument, but also communicating your passion. Keep the covering letter short. Publishers are busy people. They don't have time to read huge, great, long screeds. Short and to the point. You should also include a synopsis of the book and a sample chapter, about 2,000 or 3,000 words, that really gives a flavour both of the book and of your abilities as a translator. And make sure that that sample translation is really polished. Show it to friends, family, get people to critique it, make sure it's absolutely as good as it can be, but also that it genuinely reflects the writing in the book, the quality of the book. Publishers need facts and figures, the length, number of pages, words, because that's going to affect the price, sales figures in its home market, if those are available, and the original publisher should be able to provide you with all that information, whether it's been in the bestseller lists, and whether the rights have been sold to other countries, because publishers use each other as a sort of benchmark. So if it's sold to X in Sweden and Y in Italy and Z in Germany, that's an indicator for them if those are publishers that they identify with. Translate some excerpts from press cuttings from literary pages of reputable publications, not whole reviews, but just salient quotes, so a page of quotes from reviews. And some biographical information about the author, previous books, sales history, whether they've won any prizes, whether there have been any films based on their books, any information that is going to sort of boost your case. Publishers are interested in investing in an author, not just in one book. So it's important for them to know, is this the third book of a very successful career so far? Is it the first book? Is it the 50th book? All these things are relevant because it gives the publisher an idea of what else there is behind this book if this one is, they publish it successfully. Include information about yourself, not your CV. You're not applying for a job, but anything that is relevant to your translation experience and what makes you the best translator for this book. Maybe it's set in an area of the country that you've lived in. Maybe you know the author. Maybe you have a particular affinity with the subject matter. Anything that is relevant to why you're the best person for this. But don't include your pets, hobbies, etc. unless relevant. Now, the kind of things that will affect the publisher's decision. First of all, there's a length. Obviously, a book that's 1,000 pages is going to cost a lot more than a book that's 200 pages. So they need to know that. Because that will affect the cost of the translation and of printing, etc. They'll also be interested in the translator's skill. Now, one of the things that you have to be aware of in taking books to publishers, especially if you're not very experienced, is that they may well decide to take the book, but then commission somebody else to translate it. It's a calculated risk. You would hope that if you've done a really good sample, and you've taken the book to them, that they would commission you, but they're not obliged to. It's a risk. It's happened to me. It's happened to other colleagues that we've taken books to publishers and they've gone elsewhere for whatever reasons, or they might decide to publish it with an American publisher who then insists on choosing the translator. There are all sorts of reasons. So anything that demonstrates your skill and underlines that is important. The information about the author, and this is a question that publishers will always ask, is if the author's alive and whether they're promotable, whether they'd be available for publicity, and whether they speak English, because there are programs that won't interview authors unless they speak English. Another thing that's might help swing a decision is whether the book's part of a series, because obviously if the book's successful and there are others behind, they can piggyback on that success. Is the country of origin fashionable for some reason? Is there some kind of centenary? Is it in the news a lot? Is it a talking point? And of course, another factor is whether the editor can read the language or whether they'll need to rely on an outside reader. If the editor can read the language, they'll feel more comfortable making a decision about the book because they can read it for themselves. If they can't, but if your presentation is compelling, it will then go to one of their trusted readers. So things might go quiet for a while. If they are interested, they'll want the opinion of their readers. If an outside reader comes back very positive, they might want to send it to a second one, just to be sure. So there could be a lull while they're doing all this. And then, again, the editor will need to think about whether they can fight for that book in an editorial meeting and convince their colleagues. So you need to give them all the tools you can to help them convince their colleagues. A question people often ask is it okay to approach several publishers at once, or should you only approach one at a time? I would say it's a good idea to approach 3 or 4, because if you only approach one and wait for their answer, you could be waiting for a very long time. Some publishers respond, others don't, they're just too busy. And I would suggest you write to them, you send your submission by post as hard copy, not as an email with 15 attachments, because it's very unlikely that they would open an email from someone they don't know with attachments and then print them all out and read them. So have the courtesy to send your submission as a printout. By all means, a brief email to say, I've sent you something in the post, but I do think it's better to send them hard copy. If the publisher is interested, they might get back to you. They would ask to see a copy of the entire book. So you need to have a spare copy or 2 of the book itself to send out if they do want to have the book read by one of their advisors. Another thing is that the publisher might not be interested in the book that you're proposing, but they might see you as somebody who's got their finger on the pulse of the literature that's being published in the country that whose works you translate. So they might just say, not interested in this, but what else are you reading? So have a couple of other things up your sleeve. Publishers sometimes say, oh, we don't do translations, it's too expensive. And as astonishing as it might seem, some of them don't seem to be aware of all the funding that's available. So make it your job to know what funding is available for your language from the countries you translate from. Sometimes there are national grants, sometimes there are pen grants, but make it your job to know what's available. So if they say, sorry, we just don't do translations, it's too expensive, you can then immediately say, but you could apply for this or that grant. So what happens next? Let's say you've sent off your proposal and the publisher's interested. Once they've had readers' reports back, and if they decide they want to go ahead, they then need to acquire the translation rights. So they will have to approach the foreign publisher or rights holder, it's usually the publisher, and a negotiation takes place. And that can take a long time. It can take weeks, it can take months, depending on the country. So things will go very quiet. And once they have signed a contract with the foreign publisher, then they'll be in a position to commission a translation, hopefully from you. Thank you.